Welcome to Testimony Mountain. I just wanted to do a little intro to what we're offering today. A good friend of mine, Nikki Pugh, is going to be sharing on the Kabbalah tree, which is really, really important to understand for survivors, that this is usually programmed in the majority of survivors, if not all of us. And it's important to walk through renunciation, to deal with it how the Lord leads you, so we can be fully free. She gives a lot of history, different people involved in it, but I hope you will enjoy this today. And if you're interested, we have resources for walking through renunciations. So just reach out to Adina at transformations.community. So enjoy.
Hello friends, Nikki here, and today I'm going to talk to you about Kabbalah and the Kabbalah tree. Firstly, I want you to know that I'm not an expert on this subject, and I do not come from a Jewish background. My knowledge on this subject comes from my own research, and I'm especially drawing from Dan Duval's 12-part series on Kabbalah that he did through his Bride Ministries Exposing Truth platform on YouTube. If you want to learn more about this topic, I highly suggest that you check out that series. Along with this video is also a downloadable PDF of resources with clickable links. And just like with any of the material and transformations, if at any point in the presentation you feel triggered, challenged, disturbed, or if memories start to come in any way, I encourage you to stop the presentation and spend some time in self-care and reflection. Be kind to yourself. Take a break if you can, and you can always pick it up later. There may be some descriptions that may be potentially triggering, so please consider this as a trigger warning as well going forward. In addition, my insights into the subject of Kabbalah also come from my experience in the New Age movement and in various spiritual traditions outside of Christianity, my experiences within the Christian mystical movement, and my own revelations with God. As a survivor, I also have my own memories regarding Kabbalah and the different sephiroths, which have to do with rituals based on these constructs. And as is the case with such memories, they often come in bits and pieces, fragments of scenes and the like. I'm still very much on the journey with all this, but I will be sharing about those memories and the revelations around them as appropriate as well. In general, I simply suggest that you take in the information and do your own research as you are guided by the true family. I am not trying to convince you of anything, although I am definitely passionate about getting the relevant information out to you so that you can make informed decisions and as appropriate so that you can take action for healing and potentially disentangling from harmful contracts, agreements, and so on that may have to do with the Kabbalah tree. So what is Kabbalah? In a very general sense, Kabbalah is a collection of esoteric writings that describe deeper cosmology behind Judaism. Throughout the centuries, it has also been a source of revelation for the deep occult, as well as a literal template through which both ritual and programming takes place. We will definitely get more into the occult connections with Kabbalah and the Kabbalah tree a little bit later. But first, let's talk about Kabbalah and Judaism. Rabbis sometimes describe Kabbalah as the soul of Judaism. The authors at Chabad.com explain it this way. Inside your body breathes a person, a soul. Inside the body of Jewish practice breathes an inner wisdom, the soul of Judaism. We often call it Kabbalah, meaning receiving. Kabbalah then is the received wisdom, the native theology, and the cosmology of Judaism. As they describe it, Kabbalah is an intricate part of the overall tradition known as Judaism. Of course, over the years, different groups have definitely attempted to extract Kabbalah out of Judaism to fit their own agendas, and you see this recently not only in trendy Hollywood versions and in the New Age, but also in the Christian mystical movement. Relating to Christianity, I like how Dan Duval describes it. Learning Kabbalah in order to deeper understand our Christian roots and the Old Testament is like learning the Book of Mormon to better understand the New Testament. So how can we say that? It's because Kabbalah is, in fact, just like modern Judaism, a completely different religion than Christianity. According to Jewish rabbis themselves, no matter how you try, you simply cannot separate Kabbalah from Judaism. So let's take a look to see how Kabbalah fits into the Jewish religion. Judaic study consists of the Torah, a compilation of the first five books of the Hebrew Bible, namely the book of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The Babylonian Talmud, the primary source of Jewish religious law, or halakha, consists of the Mishnah, which is the oral Torah, or the statutes and legal interpretations not recorded in the five books of Moses, and the Gemara, the rabbinic commentary on the Mishnah, as well as other writings. And let's not forget the Kabbalah, the soul and deeper cosmology of Judaism, represented in a complex collection of Jewish esoteric books, some of which were written in ancient times, some of which were written much later. So let's take a look at some of these books. The Sefer Yetzirah, or the Book of Formations, the central text of Kabbalah that explains the Kabbalah tree and the corresponding creation story, compiled in the 6th century with obscure origins. The Bahir, i.e., the Book of Illuminations, a rather dense, abstract epitome that surveys the essential concepts of Kabbalah, written in the 12th century in Provence, France. And just a quick note here, the concept of illumination is very important for many occult organizations, including the Jesuits. Survivor and author Savali speaks of her Kabbalah training when she writes, "I am 4 years old. I have entered a room that has special black and white patterns with white and black squares, diamonds and half squares, as well as numbers and runes written in beautiful white or gold letters. This is a depiction of a part of the Kabbalah. In one of my systems, the Kabbalah is the pathway to enlightenment, one which involves learning complex numerical sequences with spiritual meaning." Savali is talking about Kabbalic gematria and goes on to describe a set involving the angelic world that she must navigate. Within the occult, individuals as well as demonic entities, i.e. potentially fallen angels, play the role of holy angels, and this training is often a big part of Kabbalah training as well. See Dan Duval video number 10 for more information about angelic orders and the Kabbalah. The next book on our list is the Sefer HaHashek, or the Book of Delight, having to do with divine meanings and their use in mystical practices. This is a topic that is especially relevant to how the occult has used the sacred names of God, especially the Tetragrammaton, for witchcraft and for hacking into the spiritual world. The Zohar, or the Book of Splendor, is a mystical commentary on the Torah that many believe to be the most important book of the Kabbalah. It was written potentially by one author, Moses de Leon, in Spain in the 13th century. The next we have the Sha'ar HaGelgulim, or the Gate of Reincarnations, based on the Zohar and the Torah concept of reincarnation, as well as the Kabbalist end of days eschatology. It was written in the 16th century. Finally, we have 3 Enoch, also called the Palaces, or the Elevation of Metatron. Not to be confused with Enoch 1, 3 Enoch is a Kabbalistic text that overlaps with Merkabah mysticism. It tells the story of Enoch, the same Enoch from Enoch 1 and 2, who after ascending into heaven on a storm chariot, i.e. Merkabah, is enthroned there and becomes the exalted angel Metatron, where he receives revelation on cosmological secrets regarding creation, precious metals, and other topics. As the story goes, 3 Enoch was potentially first written in 70 CE during or shortly after the fall of Jerusalem. However, the first printed edition did not appear until the 17th century, and the first time this text was actually called 3 Enoch was not until 1928. A side note here, Metatron is a vastly important figure within Kabbalah and plays a role in end times eschatology and prophecy, i.e. end time programming for survivors, as well as depictions of what we would call the Antichrist. I will be talking a little bit more about Metatron later in reference to Metatron's cube, but be sure to check out Dan Duval's video number 5 if you want an in-depth study. The next thing that is important to understand about Kabbalah is its relationship to understanding Torah. According to Kabbalah, there are 4 basic ways to read and interpret Torah. These are called parties. The first one is Peshat, straightforward reading. Number 2 is Remez, deeper reading. Number 3 is Midrash, for rabbis and scribes, the ability for comparative analysis of texts and concepts. Number 4 is Sod, for the initiated. Yes, you must be initiated according to Judaism to learn Kabbalah. That's the reading of the Torah through the lens of Kabbalah. In addition, according to Kabbalic and Talmud-related eschatology, there is one more level of understanding the Torah that hasn't been revealed yet. It is called Remez ha-Remezim, meaning secret of secrets. This is a level of Torah beyond Kabbalah, which will be revealed at, according to Kabbalah, the Feast of Leviathan, at the end of the age of Tukum Olam, or the repair of the world. A quick note here, Tikkun Olam is a major part of the Kabbalist creation story as part of their version of the fall, which they call the breaking of the vessels. The Feast of Leviathan will open up a new age, according to Kabbalah, and a unification of consciousnesses, i.e. oneness. In this scenario, Leviathan is actually a good guy, and the feast is a meal on his flesh. I won't go more into the disturbing nature of this event in any more detail. Suffice it to say that, like Metatron, Leviathan, often depicted as 2 Leviathans in Kabbalah and the Talmud, is a very important presence within this cosmology. Issues pertaining to the New World Order, the nation state of Israel, artificial intelligence, and political Zionism are connected as well. For more information on what is called the kosher serpent, as well as more specifics about the Feast of Leviathan, be sure to check out the Dan Duval Kabbalah series video at number 8 and number 9. Now skipping to modern times, I want to bring up a list of just a few of the many influential people within the occult that have been majorly influenced by Kabbalah. This motley crew of occultists studied Kabbalah deeply, and their input added to what can be called Hermetic Kabbalah. According to Wikipedia, this is a Western esoteric tradition involving mysticism and the occult. It is the underlying philosophy and framework for magical societies, such as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, Masonic organizations, the Rosicrucians, the Thelemic orders, and mystical religious societies like the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross. Now take a moment to let all that soak in. You may have heard whistleblowers and survivors who have come out of Brotherhood systems talk about these orders. Grotesque and deeply traumatic rituals and initiations are an intricate part of the higher levels of these orders. And at this level, they are populated by globalists and elite individuals. Some modern occult influencers who gained revelation from studying Kabbalah include Eliphas Levi, a 19th century French author, socialist, and high-level ceremonial magician who wrote over 20 books on cult topics. Albert Pike, a 19th century American author, poet, lawyer, and prominent Scottish Rite Freemason, achieving the rank of Provisional Grand Master of the Royal Order of Scotland. He was the author of the book Morals and Dogma, which helped that order to grow. He was also an expert in the Hindu Vedic traditions. Helena B. Blavatsky, whose writings married Neoplatonism, Renaissance magic, Kabbalah, and Freemasonry, along with Egyptian and Greco-Roman mythology and Tibetan Buddhism, to synthesize the idea of ancient wisdom handed down from prehistoric times. In other words, she created the propaganda and the needed tagline for the creation of the modern term New Age, which you may have gotten directly from Kabbalist eschatology, and was also the first to coin the phrase the Age of Aquarius. She believed that the Jews actually stole books of black magic from the Chaldeans, and she might have been true in that assumption. She went on to form the Theosophical Society along with Alice Bailey, who formed the Lucifer Trust, now known as the Lucis Trust. Interestingly, the Lucis Trust and its Goodwill Initiative have earned the support of the United Nations and now claims the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as one of its financial partners. A.E. Waite, an occult writer who wrote books on esotericism, Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, Kabbalah, and alchemy. He was also co-creator of the widely popular Waite Rider Tarot deck, now called the Rider Tarot deck. In 1929, he wrote the book The Holy Kabbalah, a few years after writing his book, The Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. Just a quick note about the Tarot deck. This is a very common and popular deck that pretty much everyone in the New Age has somewhere laying around their house or apartment. I had one and often used it and had no idea whatsoever that the person who created it was a Kabbalist or part of any kind of nefarious secret society. If I would have known, especially about the Brotherhood connection, I may have thought twice. Anyhow, it just shows that the amount of, you don't know what you don't know, that people in general in all walks of life can have about these things, both Christian and non-Christian alike. MacGregor Mathers, one of the three founders of the Order of the Golden Dawn, and a mentor of Aleister Crowley, who is one of the most infamous occultists of the 20th century. Manly P. Hall, a 20th century Canadian high-ranking Freemason, Rosicrucian, astrologer, and mystic. He was the founder of the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles, a place that I actually have visited, and was author of the well-known book, The Secret Teaching of All Ages, which was an encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, Luciferian, symbolic philosophy. Anton LaVey, a 20th century author, musician, and Satanist, and the founder of the Church of Satan. He was also a mentor to Michael Aquino. LaVey Satanized versions of John Dee's Enochian keys, a form of Hermetic Kabbalah. Aquino was a military man and an open Satanist who spearheaded military mind control programming projects, especially related to the Gateway Project. Aquino was the author of the so-called fictional series Mind Wars, which became the basis for the Star Wars movies. You can learn a lot about Aquino through Jesse Zabota's series on the Gateway Project on Aquarius arising. The Scofield Bible. Kabbalah has also indirectly influenced more mainstream traditional Christian doctrines as well, especially when it comes to dispensationalism. Dispensationalism, as opposed to covenant theory, maintains that biblical history can be divided into different ages or dispensations where God interacts with the chosen people in different ways. Dispensationalists have a literal interpretation of the Bible and maintain beliefs in premillennialism and the rapture. Dispensationalists also believe that God has a different covenant with Israel, and we are to basically support those in Israel first and foremost. That is why many lean towards Christian Zionism and support the building of the Third Temple in Jerusalem. The building of the Third Temple and bringing back of animal sacrifice is very important to Kabbalah and Talmud, end times eschatology, and prophecy. The Kabbalah connection to dispensationalism has to do with the fact that the publication of the Scofield Bible was financed directly by Zionist bankers. The Scofield Reference Bible was the Bible of choice for seminary student study across the nation during the beginning part of the 20th century and influenced an entire generation of evangelical leaders and ministers, many of which are still in practice today within Baptist, Pentecostal, and charismatic circles in particular. Yuval Noah Harari. Harari is an Israeli medievalist, military historian, public intellectual, and writer who currently serves as professor in the Department of History at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He is a close counselor to Klaus Schwab, founder and current director of the World Economic Forum. I personally have no hard proof that Harari, who publicly calls himself an atheist, has deeply the Kabbalah, but his open practice of Vipassana meditation techniques, which come from the Burmese Theravada tradition, and his futuristic technocratic writings, as well as his massive influence with global elites, some call him the prophet, have me wondering. His books examine the possible consequences of a futuristic biotechnical world, and his TED Talks discuss population control, posing the question, what should we do with all the superfluous people once we have highly intelligent, non-conscious algorithms that can do almost everything better than humans? Definitely one to watch out for. So now let's dive into the Kabbalah tree of life, otherwise known as the Kabbalah tree of the knowledge of good and evil. How can this tree be called both the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil? It's because in this cosmology, it is one and the same. The Kabbalah tree is a guide for the foundational creations behind Judaism, a cosmic structure existing in the second heaven, a potential map for the government of Lucifer. More about that a little later. A programming template, since it can also be overlaid onto the human body for ritual. For example, at Tiferet, which is the heart, there may be a ritual designed to stop a person's heart and then to start it up again in order to fuse the tree into the heart. In Keter, which is the crown, is where you may find rituals having to do with the pineal gland, and so on. In Dan Duval's first video, he explained how he discovered what he called at first the template. He was stumped because no matter how he tried, different kinds of prayer, renunciation, etc., in some individuals, there was a template that was blocking freedom for that individual. No matter what he did, nothing helped him to get through for deliverance and freedom to happen. He finally realized that it was the Kabbalah tree itself that was the problem, and that the individual needed to be disentangled from the tree structure itself in order to find freedom. That is why he created the prayer pulling out of the Kabbalah tree of life, which is also available in this week's lesson. As Dan Duval says, the Kabbalah tree is both a cosmic structure and a programming template. It exists both for the individual in their body as it's been programmed and initiated, and it also exists in the cosmos across dimensions. It's both macro and micro, inside and outside, and people are interfaced to this macro tree. On a personal note, one of the first memories that popped for me early on in relation to my experience in the system had to do with a grid that I was tethered to that was located at some point along the tree. I am not completely sure, but I do believe it may have had something to do with the passageway between the nodal points of Keter and Chakma, which we will talk about in a minute. In a vision, I saw Yeshua releasing me from the bondage of the tree by removing tiny pins, which I called metals, that were holding me energetically in the suspension on that point. In rapid fire, I saw his hands, which were brilliant and golden, removing the pins so that my body, energy system, and psyche could be free. Now let's take a look at the points on the tree and then talk about just a few key points in the creation story as we go along. On the traditional Kabbalah tree, there are 10 points, also called spheres or nodes. Each of these points are called a sephirot. The sephara are divided into 3 categorical columns. In addition, the right side of the tree is male and is represented in general by mercy. The left side of the tree is female in nature and is described as having severity as its general energy. In general, the sephira function as a spiritual DNA pattern for the design and creation and the design of man. Again, this is why the tree is so effective for occult programming. The tree itself can be infused into a human being, their energy system, their psyche, their parts, and even physical organ systems, in my opinion, or specific sephirot points can be access points for making connections for contracts and engagements, arrangements, and other events with fallen beings, principalities, etc., through ritual. The Kabbalah creation story starts out above Keter in a reinterpretation of Genesis 1:1-3. That passage in the Bible says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." The Kabbalah version, however, goes something like this. God has always existed. In his ultimate essence, God is all things, all space, all time, all consciousness, all things that are opposite these elements too. In his ultimate essence, God is unknowable. The ultimate essence of God is called Ein Sof, meaning limitless light from nothing. Ein Sof is God transcendent in his pure essence, i.e. God himself, apart from his relationship to the created world. And note here, the basic premise that God is ultimately unknowable in a direct and personal way is pretty much the exact opposite of what Jesus said in John 14:7. "If you have known me, then you have known my Father also, and from now on you know him and have seen him." This is just one example in many as we go along the Kabbalah tree and the creation story, where reinterpretations of biblical text extract the meaning, significant, and even the very existence of Jesus Christ from the picture entirely. This is the problem with Kabbalah, says Duval. It is so entwined with the Old Testament and with actual scripture that separating out wheat from tares when it comes to Kabbalistic fables and myths is really hard. Continuing on, Kabbalists say that Ein Sof has a desire to create, so he does. He creates a void, or halal, inside of himself, where light contracts, zoom, within his void, and he forms the universe. He then shines his light back into the void to make another light that is less intense, so as to create boundary, form, and definition. Ein Sof does all this according to Kabbalah, so that man can know him, at least on some level. But this knowing must be earned, since it occurs according to your level of initiation, according to Kabbalah. Here, from the very beginning, we see a major connection to the Brotherhood systems in the form of initiation rites and levels. Especially for the Masonic, many of these rituals come straight out of Kabbalah. Moving on, Ein Sof shines his light, and it moves through a series of sephira, like transformers or filters, to tone down the intensity of light. The first injection of light is at the crown, or Keter. According to Kabbalah, Ein Sof does this again because of his desire or will to do so. It is at this point that a presence called Adam Kadmon who is also called the primordial man, or I am, appears. This Adam is not a physical man, and is actually androgynous. Adam Kedmon is associated with Keter, or the crown, and according to Kabbalah, contains all the other lower worlds within his form. He is not the Adam from the Garden of Eden, but is considered the first Adam. The Adam from the garden is actually called the second Adam. According to Chabad.com, light emanated from the eyes of Adam Kadmon, signifying a descent from an internal essential level to an external sensory level. The Kabbalists then replaced the idea that Elohim, God himself, is a creator with another version of creation where Elohim becomes actually a created entity and a product of teamwork between Ein Sof, Keter, i.e. Adam Kadmon, and Chakma, the first male Sephiroth representing wisdom. This part of the creation story, further distances a student of Kabbalah from Jesus by again completely leaving him out of the story. It is in fact in direct contrast to John 1:1, which says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Dan Duval postulates that possibly that the Kabbalah tree is in fact a revelation, almost like a spiritual map, if you will, of the government of Lucifer. There's a kind of an unwritten rule in the cult that you have to, at least in some way, tell people what you're doing so as to get their consent. In this vein, it kind of makes sense that there would have to be some kind of clue somewhere in the natural world for such a government. And the Kabbalah tree itself as a map, it just kind of makes sense to me. That being said, this first inception point of God's life in reference to will that I mentioned earlier is pretty telling. Does this will of Ein Sof maybe connect back to the 5 I wills of Satan, which every Brotherhood initiate must recite at some point in their career as they go up the ladder? After all, those 5 I wills are also the very reason for Lucifer's fall from heaven in the first place. It's just something to consider. Going forward, on the tree, there are 22 lines or paths connecting the Sephiroth, or nodal points. From Keter, the crown, light or primordial energy works its way down in a zigzag formation to go through Chakma, right ear, Bina, left ear, Da'at, invisible Sephiroth, located at the throat, Chesed, the right shoulder, Guvara, the left shoulder, Tifret, the heart, Nishet, the right elbow and hips, Had, the left elbow and hips, Yesed, the genitals, and Malkut, the feet. Yet another factoid to add to Dan Duval's hypothesis about the Kabbalah tree being a window into Lucifer's government is this zigzag shape that looks a lot like a lightning bolt. Could it be a hint to Luke 2:10-8? When Jesus said, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven"? Who knows? Each Sephiroth also contains within it 4 worlds that are connected to the earthly elements amongst other things. Through initiation, ritual, and ascension, the goal for the advanced Kabbalist is to learn how to navigate through these worlds. There are also designations for what is called the abyss. And related, there are also 6 Sephira, which make up Metatron's cube. Metatron has multiple meanings in Kabbalah. And one important one is as a transportation device through which you can travel across the abyss to get to the different parts of the world. The abyss is not a nice place. So if you're an occultist wanting to get to the other side of that thing, you're going to want to use that. I have had multiple experiences in traveling through the abyss in my own way, via meditations that were once couched in different traditions, not necessarily the cube outright. Because the Kabbalah tree is a template on which many things can be overlaid, I personally believe that occult versions of entire belief systems, such as Tibetan Buddhism or Kundalini Yoga, can also be overlaid onto it as well. For example, I may be doing a transcendental meditation technique called TM, or I may be doing a yoga pose and not even know that I am standing energetically on a point within the Kabbalah tree. This is especially true for those of us who have had direct or indirect experience with programming having to do with the tree. So just to share one personal story about this, I was a very new Christian and still partly involved in the New Age. I was at a conference when we were doing a meditation led by individuals who were trained in Buddhist techniques, as well as psychology, mindfulness, and leadership. We were being directed through a guided meditation to go into a tunnel of light with the intention of emerging on the other side with a clear vision of our professional and personal goals for the coming year. Seems harmless enough, right? As I closed my eyes and entered into the meditation, I heard clearly from the Lord, do not go into the tunnel of light. I still had my eyes closed, but Yeshua was gently directing me to simply hang out with him above it. He took me to a place above the tunnel where I saw that it was a geometric shape, and it had a lot of gunk on it, and it also smelled awful. I could see other individuals entering the inside of the tunnel, and I knew that those were the others involved in the meditation going on right now, or at least parts of those people. They looked happy and focused until they got inside the tunnel, and then they appeared lost, confused, and scared. At the time, I clearly heard Yeshua say that these individuals were going to a place called Shambhala. I knew this word very well. In Buddhism, Shambhala is portrayed as a paradise and even a heavenly place. But the way that the people were looking as they approached it, as well as Yeshua's cautions about it to me, told me that perhaps this was not entirely correct. This was the first time I had even considered that Shambhala may be a place other than how it had always been advertised in the New Age. Although I was really glad I listened to Yeshua and did not enter the tunnel, I really didn't know the deeper meaning of the experience until I learned fully about Metatron's cube and how people or their parts can get trapped there. Yeshua revealed the rest of the story later on. Those leaders, unconsciously or consciously, honestly, I really don't know, were coaxing the entire group of about 500 people into a version of Metatron's cube, with the intention of bringing them into a false reality in the second heaven called Shambhala. The actual conference I attended that day was not Kabbalist in nature, and there was no discussion whatsoever about Metatron's cube. It was just a simple guided meditation at a leadership conference. What I learned from the Lord eventually was that even in seemingly benign situations, there may be overlays and templates that we are not even aware of, along with agendas to ensnare, bind, hold captive, or negatively activate individuals. Lesson learned for me, this and other experiences like it, is why I just like to check with the true family of God and err on the side of caution if I don't know. That's kind of my go-to these days. So what does all this have to do with Jesus? It doesn't, except for the very glaring fact that Kabbalah works to systematically take Jesus out of the equation completely in a person's mind, heart, consciousness, and life. It may sound good at first, and there are elements of Kabbalah that are very close to the truth, but this also is indicative of how the kingdom of darkness works to get as close as possible to God's truth so as to reel people in and then veer them off into another path altogether that has to do with anything but God's plan. In this way, before you know it, you are in another religion completely, whose fruit has informed and influenced the major occultists of our time, and whose template is used for the systematic abuse and ritualistic torture of thousands. With the Kabbalah, in my opinion, you learn corrupt ways of engaging in the spirit world. In relationship with the true family of God, and securely get grafted into Jesus Christ and the true tree of life, however, you can step into rest, healing, relationship, love, acceptance, protection, provision, sonship, and real truth. You absolutely get to explore the mysteries, and you absolutely do have amazing and deeply meaningful encounters in the heavenlies with Yeshua leading the way every step of the way. It is an amazing yet amazingly simple journey with the true family of God that I wish for everyone. Learn acceptance of yourself and learn to see yourself as God sees you. You have a family, and you are a beloved son or daughter of God that gets to know your Father deeply and personally. Within Christ, we learn to become who we are in the way God intended. And within relationship, your spirit is strengthened so that Christ can occupy more parts of our whole being. And you can walk with Jesus and with Holy Spirit and with true Abba here in the natural, every day of your life and be a real blessing on the earth as you do. As Jesus says in Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. I send blessings to you, my friends, and I will see you again really soon. Bye now.